My Fair Lady was about glamour. I think that film was about style, and that film was about a dream, and that film was about remarkable costuming, and it made people want to dream. It was romantic. It was everything that nowadays is not. In spades, it was that.
Well, I think that the whole project was one of those projects where every area just sort of went like that, didn't it? It just all came into one.
To lose the movie of My Fair Lady would be a tragedy, because it's a wonderful testament to a wonderful show, and it has terrific performances in it. And obviously, certainly from a personal point of view, it would be a great shame not to have the old man up there prancing about.
Whether the film is a version of Shakespeare or whether it's about breakdancing, it's art. It's art, and it's American. And the sooner there's a concentrated effort to embrace that, and to be proud of it, to have fun with it, and to preserve it, the better it'll be for all of us, I think. And it's very, very important for the future generations.
It was a feast for the eyes and ears, the kind of musical extravaganza that lifts the spirit and leaves audiences humming as they exit the theatre. And from its inception as a musical, it had all the makings of a hit. I'm Jeremy Brett. Believe it or not, that was me. In 1964, when I played the love-struck Freddie Eynsford Hill, come to call on a ravishing young lady named Eliza Doolittle in the film version of My Fair Lady.
How do you do?
How do you do? Examining it recently, a team of expert film restorers discovered a fading piece of art about to be lost forever. In their efforts to rescue this damsel in distress, they also uncovered a wealth of buried treasure, including never-before-seen footage of how the film was made, audio tracks of George Cukor directing us on the set, Audrey Hepburn's original soundtracks, and the stories behind the headlines that put this film on everyone's lips. So come with me now, and journey through time and back again for a rare, behind-the-scenes look at how this incredible chapter in American musical history was created, how its magic was almost lost through time, and how a team of skilled craftsmen pulled it back from the brink of disaster.
We're on our way. Hollywood Star Newsreel cameras are off to the premiere of My Fair Lady.
We all had the feeling that we were part of something extraordinary. When My Fair Lady had its premiere, Jack Warner orchestrated one of the grandest marketing campaigns anyone has ever seen.
All the ladies came in beautiful long gowns, trailing enormous trains, jewels, sparkling coiffures, perfect. Everybody looked like they just stepped out of a role in a movie.
The star of the picture, Rex Harrison.
My Fair Lady was everywhere. Dolls, makeup kits, albums, posters. This was Warner's personal production. He wanted it to be the gala event of the decade, and it was. The results were astounding. Rave reviews, record ticket sales. My Fair Lady was booked for 2 years running, and for the crowning achievement was nominated for 12 Academy Awards.
The world's most honored motion picture is My Fair Lady, winner of 8 Academy Awards, including Best Performance by an Actor, Best Direction, and the most coveted award of all, Best Picture. Everybody has fallen in love with the Academy Award-winning champion, My Fair Lady, in Technicolor and Super Panavision from Warner Brothers.
The roots of My Fair Lady reach back as far as Greek mythology. to the story of Pygmalion and Galatea. Since then, the story has inspired a number of writers, including the great George Bernard Shaw, the Irish critic and playwright. Shaw's version, Pygmalion, a play in 5 acts, was published in 1913. Filmmaker Gabriel Pascal convinced Shaw to cooperate in a new screen adaptation for which the 82-year-old dramatist won an Oscar for the best screenplay in 1938. Leslie Hard starred with Wendy Hiller as Eliza Doolittle. It was photographed by a prominent cinematographer named Harry Stradley, who later went on to film My Fair Lady.
In 1952, two legends of American musical theatre, Rodgers and Hammerstein, attempted to bring Pygmalion to a wider audience by combining music with Shaw's witty dialogue. After a year of fruitless labor, they announced to the world it could never be done.
I don't know why other people have had problems putting it to music at all, because it seemed to me, I suppose perhaps because My Fair Lady is so perfect anyway, I mean, even the title is so perfect, that you can't conceive of any other way of it being done, and therefore you can't conceive of why anybody might have had a problem in doing it.
Then, in 1954, the talented team of Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Fritz Lowe, creators of the musical hits Brigadoon and Paint Your Wagon, finally found the solution.
Alan thought that they were missing the point. It's very interesting. George Bernard Shaw writes about ideas. Songs express feelings. And he felt that what Dick and Oscar were trying to do was to write songs about feelings from material which was totally cerebral and intellectual. So he thought a great singer should never play Henry Higgins. A great actor should play Higgins. And that the lyrics should come out of the language of Shaw.
Look at her, a prisoner of the gutters, condemned by every syllable she utters. By right, she should be taken out and hung for the cold-blooded murder of the English tongue.
The work fell into place. They were on a roll. They just absolutely could not stop themselves.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
I think she's got it. I think she's got it.
The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
By George, she's got it.
I will never forget the night that they awakened me and dragged me over, and they played The Rain in Spain, with the two of them leaping about, both playing all the parts. And I was stunned. I had never experienced or seen or heard that kind of brilliance coming out of the written play.
In Hertford, Hereford, and Hampshire,
Hurricanes hardly happen. How kind of you to let me come.
Now once again, where does it rain?
On the plain, on the plain.
And where's that blasted plain?
In Spain, in Spain.
The rain in
CBS Chairman William S. Paley agreed to finance the show for $400,000 in exchange for exclusive rights to the cast album. My Fair Lady opened at the Mark Hellinger Theatre on March the 15th, 1956.
Rex Harrison as Professor Higgins, Julie Andrews as Eliza Doolittle, and Stanley Holloway as Alfred Doolittle were cheered to the rafters.
My Fair Lady is, I think, probably the last of the great musicals from Broadway to reach the screen in the mid-'60s, which was pretty much the end of the American musical genre in Hollywood. When it opened on Broadway, I remember the news that morning, the reviews on television early in the morning talking about just an instant classic of this incredible piece of work called My Fair Lady.
What Lerner and Lowe created was one of the greatest musicals in stage history, eclipsing the successes of the Broadway hits Oklahoma, Carousel, The King and I, South Pacific, and Guys and Dolls. Sitting in the audience opening night was Warner Brothers studio head Jack L. Warner. Paley's gamble paid off when Jack Warner outbid all other studios, buying the screen rights for $5.5 million, an unheard of sum at that time. At the end of 7 years, the rights would revert back to CBS, but for now, the lady belonged to Warner.
I admired Jack Warner. He was one of the last moguls. He was a very interesting man, understood the business, was one of the old moguls by the seat of the pants. And he would tell you at a premiere that if he squirmed 3 times, it needed some work in the cutting.
He was the ultimate movie maker. I remember that when he came over the hill coming from Hollywood into Burbank toward Warner Brothers, a great billboard would greet your eyes. Warner Brothers, combining good citizenship with good motion pictures.
I could have danced all night. I could have
Jack Warner's wish was to preserve this brilliant piece of art forever.
Now say good night.
But such was almost not to be. Imagine this masterpiece lost forever. Now, this idea is not so far-fetched as it may sound. Since the beginning of motion picture history, roughly 100 years ago, nearly 50% of all films produced are gone for all time.
At Warner Brothers, we had large vaults, lines and rows of them. I was in and out of those vaults, picking prints up, old prints, usually staying out of the vaults, naturally, that held the negative. But every once in a while, that negative would start to frost up and get white and chalky. Fire department would come up there. They would go in there and carefully lift out the negative and take it away and dump it. And there went, I never thought about it at the time, but a whole movie.
My Fair Lady was close to being one of them. The original camera negative was on the verge of decay and in a delicate state of disrepair. And though there are a handful of restoration specialists worldwide, few had worked on Super Panavision 70. 2 who had were brought in to save the film, Bob Harris and Jim Katz.
Before you even start the formal restoration of a film, what you have to do is a great deal of research. You try and round up worldwide every surviving element on the film, which all has to be gone through so that you make sure that you find out what it says on the outside of the can or what it says on the inventory is really in the can of film.
We come in here like they call us vault rats because we come in here and we can spend days in here. I mean, you could put Bob and I in here with a couple of people and we could stay in here for 12 hours and not even know the time had passed because it's just almost a mission of discovery. This has been an extraordinarily difficult restoration. The original camera negative was so brittle that it kept tearing and would have to start all over again, presenting us with a unique set of problems unlike any of our other restorations.
Bob Harris is best known perhaps for his restoration work on David Lean's epic Lawrence of Arabia. He teamed up with producer Jim Katz to restore Stanley Kubrick's film classic Spartacus. That experience would help them face the many obstacles confronting the restoration of My Fair Lady.
The first piece of film that anyone is going to see on screen is going to be the main title sequence. The main title sequence of My Fair Lady was duped multiple times. We have digs and scratches, and we have dirt that's actually built in. But the most incredible thing is that piece of dirt, whether it's a chip of film or whatever it is, and we had to remove that digitally.
This is a digital film center whose services we took advantage of because of their ability to turn film into digital information and solve the problems, correct the problems, and then return it back to film without a loss of generation. Kevin, who's a digital artist, has been working specifically on the Jack Warner sequences.
Basically, through this program, I'm able to clone areas of color over the offending area to eliminate it.
The important thing to realize here is that that looks small on a video screen, but on a 60 or 70 foot motion picture screen, that spot looks like you could drive a Buick through it.
That chip, as you can see now, is pretty much gone.
The My Fair Lady negative was the largest single 70mm printing of any large format film in history. We have a negative that is strewn with dupe sections, dirt, scratches, torn perforations. It's literally worn out.
When it's pale, when the color is pink, when the color is blue or pink, you begin to lose the detail in the actors' faces. You begin to lose the performances. You begin to lose information. You lose information in the frame. It's not telling a story anymore. There's no more communication. There's no more film.
You ought to be stuffed with nails, you ought. Here, take the old blooming basket for 6pence.
A reminder. How many are there, actually?
How many what?
Indian dialects.
No fewer than...
What we were about to lose was one of the most exciting films ever to come out of Hollywood. It was the culmination of the best work of some of the most talented people in their respective fields. George Cukor's direction, Cecil Beaton's costumes, Andre Previn's score. A cast that included Audrey Hepburn, Rex Harrison, Stanley Holloway. And let's not forget the music and words of Leonard and Lowe.
Alan had one song to complete, and he was struggling with it. He was having a hard time, and rehearsals were about 2 or 3 months away. So he was under pressure. And one afternoon, I went down the stairs, and he was sitting there, and he said, you know, I am hopelessly stuck. He said, I have to write a song for Higgins about his feelings for Eliza.
Goodbye, Professor Higgins. You shall not be seeing me again.
I have to write a love song that isn't a love song.
She's gone.
Well, of course, dear. What did you expect?
So, I said, would you like a cup of tea? And he said, great idea. So I raced up the stairs and I arranged the tea tray and I came down the stairs very slowly because it was a big tray. And he was watching me and he looked up and he said, you know, Nancy, he said, you really are quite a pretty girl. I put the tea tray down and said, thanks a lot. He said, no. I wake up with you every morning. I'm with you all day. He said, I forget. He said, all I'm trying to say is that I've grown accustomed to you. I've grown accustomed to your face. He said, just a minute. Stay where you are. He raced over to his desk, grabbed his yellow legal pad, got his pencil out of his pencil cup, and he sat down and he wrote,
I've grown accustomed to her face. She almost makes the day begin. I've grown accustomed to the tune that she whistles night and noon. Her smiles, her frowns, her ups, her downs are second nature to me now. Like breathing out and breathing in. I was serenely independent and content before we met. Surely I could always be that way again. And yet, I've grown accustomed to her looks, accustomed to her voice, accustomed to her face.
When Alan J. Lerner sat down to write his Higgins, he did it with one actor in mind, Rex Harrison. A stage actor with screen credits on Blythe's Spirit, Anne and the King of Siam, Cleopatra and the Reluctant Debutante, among others. Harrison had the perfect persona to turn Henry Higgins from a bookish phonetics professor into a charismatic leading man.
You know, it's almost irresistible.
And Lerner knew it.
She's so deliciously low, so horribly dirty.
I ain't dirty. I washed my face and hands before I come, I did.
I'll take it. I'll make a duchess of this draggle-tailed gutter snipe.
I tried all sorts of things. I'd been to singing instructors, and I knew I was never going to be able to sing properly. So I got this man in, and I said, what the hell am I going to do with this? With these numbers? And he said, well, what about talking on pitch? And I said, how do you talk on pitch then? And he showed me, which was the beginning of what I try and do, which is using notes, but really with speech. And it was, so Bill Lowe is my Higgins.
Well, after all, Pickering, I'm an ordinary man who desires nothing more than just an ordinary chance to live exactly as he likes and do precisely what he wants.
Since the process is usually that you have to pre-record and then mouth to that, he was told that that's what the way they were going to do it, and he said, I can't do it that way. I won't do it that way.
I'll just read to you what I said in my column. Rex Harrison refused to lip sync My Fair Lady's lyrics. He said, quote, I have never sung any one of the songs the same, he admits. So Warner Brothers Sound Department rigged for the first time a wireless mic in his cravat. Excuse me, I was being a little fancy because of Sir Rex. And Harrison sings the Alan J. Lerner lyrics to the Fritz Lowe music only, played by Andre Previn's men. Quote, they, the sound department, did a marvelous job, Harrison happily reports. But sometimes we get taxi calls, and in last week's storm, we got some static.
Free of strife, doing whatever he thinks
If you happen to look below the knot in his tie, you'll see a round object. And that is the wireless mic that they used in those days.
The way that we found out was that we were sitting here mixing one day, and I was looking at the screen, and I noticed that everyone else was slightly rubbery with synchronization. And I turned to Bob and I said, look at Rex. He is dead on in sync. And as I recall, you shut the board down and said, that's the problem. He's wearing a microphone. He's doing it live.
Let a woman in your life, and your serenity is through.
He is exceptionally brittle, what I would term to be brittle. He is a little hard on the ears in terms of the mid-range and the upper mid-range. And so we've toned him down and tried to warm him up a little bit by adding a little bottom end to his voice.
Make a plan and you will find she has something else in mind. And so rather than do either, you do something else that neither likes at all.
My Fair Lady, the soundtracks were literally hanging on by a thread.
What about your boast that you could pass her off as a duchess at the embassy ball, eh? I'll say you're the greatest teacher alive if you make that good. I'll bet you all the expenses of the experiment that you can't do it.
Oh, you're real good. Thank you, Captain.
The original 6-track music and effects has been lost or destroyed, whatever. The original 6-track composite, music, effects, and dialogue, has been lost. And the only viable sound element for a complete restoration that survived was a 6-track, what's called a printmaster, which was used to sound the 70-millimeter prints in 1964, which was actually one generation down. And before we did anything with that, we made a Dolby spectral recording copy of it on Estar-based film as protection, vaulted the original, and did the new mix and the new re-recording from the Dolby SR copy. The most intricate bit of mixing that Bob did, as far as I'm concerned, is during the Ascot sequence, when the horses literally come around the theater.
You will hear the horses coming from left of the screen as they approach the front of the grandstand. And as they come closer to the grandstand, the sound will increase. And as they disappear, the sound will subside. If you start using these techniques to a point where they become gimmicky, then it looks like we're almost second-guessing the sound, an Academy Award-winning sound crew. And basically, you have to figure what their philosophy at the time would have been and adapt it to modern techniques.
Let them buy their wedding bands for those anxious little hands. I'd be equally as willing for a dentist to be drilling than to ever let a woman in my life.
But Henry Higgins would indeed have to let a woman into his life. And what more enchanting and magical creature than the beautiful Audrey Hepburn. Audrey was discovered by the French writer Colette while she was shooting a little-known film at the Hôtel de Paris in Monte Carlo in France called Monte Carlo Baby.
But I'm only a baby. Baby? Bullocks, I refuse to utter such miserable drivel. What? You know what you can do with your precious picture. Bury it in a lonely place.
Melissa. Colette was to have a play Gigi produced on Broadway and was convinced that Audrey should have the title role. It is a twist of Hollywood irony that Audrey would be passed over for the film version of Gigi by Leslie Caron, just as Audrey would replace Julie Andrews a decade later in the screen version of My Fair Lady.
To be honest, I didn't hold out that much hope that I was going to get the role. I wished for it and wanted it, but I don't think I thought I would get it. So it wasn't as desperately awful a disappointment as people think that it might have been.
The young star of Roman Holiday, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Sabrina, and The Nun's Story was perfect for the Cinderella-like transformation from gutter snipe to regal splendor. Audrey, of course, I worked with in a film before, My Fair Lady, the film of War and Peace. Jack Cardiff, the cinematographer, once said, watch Audrey walk onto the set and you'll notice that the camera will automatically follow her. It was a love affair between the camera and Audrey.
Audrey Hepburn was an absolutely lovely human being. She was as human and unassuming and gracious as could possibly be, off screen and on. There was a dance sequence where I'm waltzing with Eliza. I'm very good at the things that I'm good at, but I'm not terribly good at the things that I'm not. And dancing is one of those, and I insisted on dancing lessons because I wasn't going to be the one who would step on her feet.
One of the great things that keeps this movie alive for generations to rediscover is the flawless casting. Audrey Hepburn, who has never been more magical. She was really at the height of her charm, the height of her power as an actress. It was a real stretch for her. I have one tiny regret about My Fair Lady, and that is that she was not allowed to do her own singing.
The one thing that happened when we found out that Audrey Hepburn was going to play the lead, we knew that we had to find a voice to sing for her. So the music department lined up 8 very good singers and made voice tests. And I was in the production room with George Cukor, the director, Andre Previn, the musical director. 10 days after that, I got a phone call from Jack Warner. He said, Rudy, are you going nuts between these two guys? They will not make up their minds who to use as a voice for Audrey Hepburn. Did you hear the tests? That, yes, I did. Who do you like? I said, in my opinion, there's just one that's perfect for this part, and that is Marnie Nixon. He said, she's got the job. That's the way it was handled.
The process of making My Fair Lady seemed to be a little bit more complicated than the other films that I'd been involved in, because the studio and the music office didn't know how much of Audrey Hepburn's voice was going to be used.
I could have danced all night, I could have danced all night, and still have begged for more.
Now comes Wouldn't It Be Lovely, and she decided that she wanted to do that whole thing herself. So she actually took the picture, filmed the picture to her own track, singing the song. And then they threw out that track, which didn't make her very happy. She walked off the set, evidently, just made a huff and walked out, from what I heard. I wasn't there. Came back to the studio the next day, apologizing to everybody for her wicked behavior, that she was being reasonable, sane, and of course it had to be. I mean, that was her idea of being very wicked. So I had to come back and loop in my voice.
Warm face, warm hands, warm feet, how wouldn't it be lovely?
Audrey Hepburn's wish would not be fulfilled during her lifetime. Marnie Nixon did a wonderful job of syncing her voice to Audrey's picture. But during their search for the elements of the film, our restorers found these original soundtracks and put them to picture for the very first time.
Chocolate for me to eat, lots of cow, making lots of it. Warm face, warm hands, warm feet, how would it be lovely? Oh, so lovely, sitting absolutely still. I would never budge till spring. Over the windowsill, someone's head resting on my knee, warm and tender as he can be, who takes good care of me.
'Tis a room somewhere, far away from the cold night air, with one enormous chair.
Wouldn't it be lovely? Lots of chocolate for me to eat, lots of towel-mite, lots of heat. Warm face, warm hands, warm feet. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Oh, so lovely, sitting absolutely still. I would never budge till spring crept over my windowsill.
Someone's head resting on my knee, warm and tender as he can be.
Who takes good care of me? Oh, wouldn't it be lovely? Don't talk of stars burning above. If you're in love, show me. Tell me no dreams filled with desire. If you're on fire, show me. Here we are together in the middle of the night. Don't talk of spring, just hold me tight. Anyone who's ever been in love will tell you that this is no time for a chat. Haven't your lips longed for my touch? Don't say how much. Show me, show me. Don't talk of love lasting through time. Make me no undying bond. Show me now.
I was not supposed to let anybody know that I was going to be doing the dubbing for Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. I think that was in my contract. I mean, all the musicians knew, everybody knew, Audrey Hepburn was not a major singer. The subject was already on everybody's lips. Well, who's doing the dubbing? You know, the dubbing is a part of the industry.
I must say I take my hat off to the marvelous people in Hollywood who twiddle all the knobs and who can make one voice out of two.
Well, I guessed that it must be your voice and just you wait Henry Higgins.
Yes, there was a lot of it.
And I thought maybe the higher soprano was when you got a little help.
That's right. Yes, because I'm not a soprano. I'm not a singer.
There was a difficulty for the film here because I suppose we're quite chauvinistic in England, and Julie Andrews had made such a huge success, of course, on stage. And there was a difficulty when the film came out, to put it mildly. I mean, I remember at the time people just saying, how can it be that an actress has been... I mean, okay, I mean, we all know that Audrey Hepburn can act wonderfully, but how could you have a dubbed actress in the role? And it did cause a bit of a backlash, and of course it also helped Mary Poppins hugely, because once Mary Poppins came out, everybody said, ha, we could have told you.
The controversy over the dubbing would reach its climax when Julie Andrews received the Oscar for Best Actress for her performance in Mary Poppins, while Audrey Hepburn was not even nominated.
There's been so much talk about your winning because Audrey wasn't nominated. Did you feel that entered into it at all?
Well, I hope it didn't. I'd like to think that I won it for good reasons rather than for those. I'll never know to this day whether it was sentiment that won it for me or whether the performance in Poppins really did. I think it's the sentiment myself.
I was upset about the fact that Audrey Hepburn and George Cukor and maybe Andre Previn thought that Audrey didn't get the Academy Award because it had been known that I was doing the dubbing, and that it was my fault that was the one that was purposefully trying to push that knowledge out.
Now, this has hurt me for the last 30 years, and I've tried to keep it under wraps, but this is the time when we're exposing so many things about this film. I should tell you, I know exactly how Audrey felt, because the same thing happened to me. When I arrived on the set, I found, to my horror, that someone else had sung my song too. My song was sung by a gentleman named Bill Shirley.
And all the towering feeling, just to know somehow you are near. Speak, and the world is full of singing, and I am winging higher than the birds.
There we were. Imagine the two of us, singing our hearts out to each other.
and all the while using someone else's voice.
Words, 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 I'm so sick of words. I get words all day through, first from him, now from you. Is that all you blighters can
It was
do?
a dreadful disappointment for Audrey, as well as for me. But as long as we're setting the record straight, I have to set the record straight too.
We also have to remember, too, that there was a great director named George Cukor, and this was one of his last really great works. And I think Cukor was a remarkable director who dealt in the 30s and in the 40s and with films that seemed to come from theater, like the Philadelphia Story and pictures like that were actually plays. And yet, even though literally most of the film had people talking in rooms, they were always movies. And I don't know how he did it. I think it was the pacing of the actors, where the position of the camera, and that sort of thing. But I've always been a great fan of Cukor's, and this is maybe his last great work.
George Cukor was one of the greatest directors of his time. Remember, he gave us Camille, Holiday, Philadelphia Story, and Judy Garland's A Star Is Born, to name but a few. In his 35-year career, he led his performers to no less than 19 Academy Award nominations.
Would you say Miss Doolittle, say?
Yeah, I would.
Say it, say it.
Miss Doolittle, my son, would like to dance with you.
And that was more queenly and...
Miss Doolittle, no.
No pause.
Miss Doolittle, my son, would like to dance with you.
Perfect.
Miss Doolittle, my son, would like to dance with you.
Cukor himself was nominated 5 times, but with My Fair Lady, the statue that proved to be so elusive was finally his.
George Cukor should get special attention for not just this picture, but for his whole career that he didn't receive during his career. He was known amongst the industry as a director's director. He was one of those, but he never really received the kind of praise that other directors did, and he was so good. He always had in his hand the script, but just the scenes that he was going to do. He didn't have the whole big script and floppy, and they were always bundled up like he was going to hit you with them. And I always thought he was going to do that to some of the actors and actresses.
Audrey Hepburn was very lucky to get this part, although in retrospect, the whole world was lucky to get Audrey Hepburn in the role. But at the time, I think she relied a great deal on George Cukor's direction. I don't know if her performance would have been as full and as rich and as vibrant if she hadn't had a lot of help from him. He was very famous for being a woman's director, and she never stopped thanking George Cukor until the day she died.
Why'd you leave me where you picked me out of in the gutter? You thank God it's all over now. You can throw me back again there, do you?
Oh, so the creature's nervous after all.
Claws in, you cat. How dare you show your temper to me? Sit down and be quiet.
What we're looking at here is a shot in which Audrey Hepburn comes back from the ball. And you go in for a nice medium close-up of her, and this spot travels right across her neck and her face. And looking at this spot on the screen, it affects the actor's performance, and that is a $10,000 expense for 7 seconds.
The tricky part with this shot was that she was moving in the scene and the spot was staying stationary, but at the same time it entered areas of flesh, which is hard to, there's so many gradations and hues and tones in there, you have to be careful in your replication. Each frame had to be dealt with independently, one at a time. And this program allows me to pull pixels from surrounding area over the offending pixels.
And that's the one shot that we had to remove digitally, no matter what the cost.
I'm your pupil. Your first, your greatest, your best pupil. I'm Zoltan Karpathy, that marvelous boy.
George Cukor asked me before we did the scene, what would you do? This Hungarian, what would he do upon meeting Professor Higgins? And I said, you may not have noticed, Mr. Cukor, but between the two of us, you are the Hungarian. I said, he was of Hungarian extraction, Cukor was. He said, yes, but you're an actor and they have better instincts. So I said, all right, I tell you what I would do as a Hungarian, I would come in and kiss him on both cheeks. He said, well, why don't you do that then? And thus it came about that I was the only male actor in the history of movies that kissed Rex Harrison.
Theodore Backel was among one of the finest supporting casts ever assembled for a motion picture, alongside the multi-talented Gladys Cooper,
Henley, what a disagreeable surprise.
the subtle comedic genius Wilfred Hyde
At
White,
a moment like this, with so much at stake, it's utterly indecent that you don't need a glass of port.
and the irrepressible Mona Washburn.
You must be reasonable, Mr. Higgins. Really, you must. You can't walk over everybody like this.
The other person we must not forget in this movie, of course, is the great English legend and Cockney Stanley Holloway. His performance probably brings England nearer to the centre of this film than any other.
The Lord above gave man an arm of iron, so he could do his job and never shirk. The Lord above gave man an arm of iron, but with a little bit of luck, with a little bit of luck, someone else will do the blinking work.
My Fair Lady gave my father a major shot in the arm because at the age where most people are retiring, he had the biggest success of his career. I mean, he was 66 when he played the part, and when he made the film, he was 72. So from a 6-year spread, My Fair Lady was very much part of our life.
Then how did you know she was here?
I'll tell you, Governor, if you only let me get a word in. I'm willing to tell you. I'm wanting to tell you. I'm waiting to tell you.
You know, Pickering, this chap's got a certain natural gift of rhetoric.
Warner Brothers wanted James Cagney to play the part.
You get me to the church on time.
Probably wouldn't have worked, and I think Cagney was one of the first people to realise this. The story went that they wanted Cary Grant to play Higgins. And Cary Grant, as I understand it, wrote to Warner Brothers to say, not only will I not do the movie, but unless you cast Rex Harrison in the part, I will never do a film for Warner Brothers again. And I think Cagney had pretty much the same sort of reaction. So they were very lucky, Rex and my father, that two greedier stars didn't actually accept the roles that were offered to them.
I got to be there in the morning, spruced up, looking in me prime. Girls, come and kiss me, kiss me, kiss me.
This is a shot of Stanley Holloway. It's a 29-foot shot in which we have a 7-frame tear, and we attempted to go back to the black and white separations and produce new dupe negative, but the first 2 takes on that negative were out of registration. Color negative film is generally protected through the use of 3 what are called black and white separations. It's basically separating the entire spectrum of color into 3 layers and dividing them into 3 equal units on 3 strips of film. The film is acetate, and it shrinks. And when each separate roll of film shrinks, you get what's called differential shrinkage. And when you try and put them together again, many times they simply don't fit. Basically, what's happening is that you'll see halos and lines around things, but it makes the entire image unsharp.
The common factor in finding a solution is ultimately what solution gives us the best look. In this case, it was to carefully repair the negative by literally taping it back together again.
Those problems are coming up daily, and that's why Jim and I have the same hairline. If it doesn't fall out, you tear it out.
This is now what is called Stage 18 at Warner Brothers Studios. It is also where the Ascot race scene was originally shot. This is what a sound stage looks like before the art director, set decorator, and costumers work their magic. One of the most extraordinary contributions that My Fair Lady made to film history was its breathtaking use of visual style, its synergy of Cecil Beaton's dazzling costumes, the brilliance of Gene Allen's dramatic sets, and art direction brought on an exciting new look to the screen, a look that audiences had never seen, a look that, well, it's best illustrated in the Ascot Gavotte.
Every Jew and Earl and here is here. Everyone who should be here is here. What a smashing, positively dashing spectacle the Ascot opening day.
Many people ask why the Ashgabat scene is done in black and white. I don't know why it was done in black and white, but for some reason at that point in the show, after seeing so much color and so much lush, the flowers, everything, to see all of these women all showing up in black and white, it stylized the entire scene. It's written very stylized, the way it is, the way they all walk around and pose. It almost became like a photograph of the period when you see those black and white photographs of women at Ascot. In fact, there are some that he based his costumes on, and they are existing now. And you go, wow, that's where he got the idea to do it in black and white. And it does work. It works beautifully. And then Audrey, with just that bit of color on her costume, really made the difference.
Colonel Pickering, you're just in time for tea.
Thank you, Mrs. Higgins. May I introduce Miss Eliza Doolittle?
My dear Miss Doolittle.
How kind of you to let me come.
Delighted, my dear.
Beaton's costumes for the play as well as for the film were remarkable. They were of such a perfection of the style of the moment. That really was one of the remarkable aspects of the film, was the presentation, really.
Cecil Beaton was a fascinating character, a designer, a photographer, artist. He was also known as a master of publicity, as you can see from the following featurette, which was found in the film vaults.
In the wardrobe department at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank, California, the magically nimble fingers of the seamstresses are busy for many months creating the gowns and the hats and the accessories and selecting the jewelry destined to adorn some of the world's most beautiful women when they will step before the cameras. But of course, the design must come first. And the man most qualified to tell you about this is the designer himself, Cecil Beaton.
It's a most exciting job, this, and one that I would have very much hated anyone else to have done, because it's a period that I love. I think it's very romantic, full of nostalgia, and for me, it brings back my earliest memories.
The fact that Cecil Beaton had designed the costumes was a big plus for the studio, because he was a very well-known photographer and a very well-known designer. And so he took pictures of every costume, and usually on Audrey Hepburn herself. So she posed in all the chorus clothes and her clothes. And of course he had photo spreads in every fashion magazines, women's magazines, you name it.
Cukor and Beaton were good friends when it started, and very shortly were no longer friends whatsoever. I think the big fallout came one time when he wanted to do some still photographs of Audrey, and Mr. Cukor was rehearsing with Audrey. But you know, you don't take the star off the set where the director wants them to shoot some stills. That's not done. I've never talked about Cecil Beaton and the designing or not designing of what he did or didn't do. The only place that it sort of interfered with me was he didn't want anybody else to know what I did. And so I have to finally tell you. The truth of it is that Cecil Beaton did the costumes and did a marvelous job and deserved the award for all of the costumes, the hair, the hats, that look. And that was his major contribution to the movie.
Gene Allen was the art director for My Fair Lady, but he actually did much more. He had worked with Mr. Cukor for 18 years, and when asked to take on the project, Cecil Beaton was already contracted to get production designer credit. It was only after George Cukor asked Mr. Allen to do it for him that Gene Allen became the uncredited production designer on My Fair Lady.
I played somewhat the same role I'd played with George Cukor for years, production designer / art director, and I shot second unit and worked with Harry Strahling with the cameraman, and then designed all of the sets.
Gene Allen's relationship with George Cukor was many areas. I don't think there could be really a classification for it. He could be, at that time, an art director or what you would call a production designer. He also was with George dealing with composition, working with the cameraman. He also worked very close with George discussing what they were going to shoot, what the cover. It was many-faceted.
It was a tremendous challenge to do that picture on a movie lot. There was a great deal to do, And it took hundreds and hundreds of craftspeople working with me to get it done. You know, you design something like Covent Garden and then build it. There are thousands of people involved in doing a film, and on that one, even more.
I'm getting married in the morning.
The pub crawl was something they promised that they would do that in actual pubs in London. But I built all those pubs in 3 or 4 different little areas, and I put false fronts in front of a bar that you could peel away, and it would be a second pub, and then you peel away another area, and it would be a third pub. And we changed the colors, and then we took the extras out in the outside the pubs, and we took spray guns and changed the color of their costumes. So we did that whole pub crawl on the lot in Hollywood, and it worked very well.
At the point when the cameras stop rolling and the actors leave the sets and go home, the post-production begins.
The editor I worked with on My Fair Lady was, in my estimation, one of the most fabulous editors that's ever hit Hollywood. Yet Hollywood doesn't really know of William Ziegler.
The producer is checking the previous day's footage with the film editor. Note the width of the 70-millimeter film Mr. Warner holds up. It's exactly twice the size of ordinary film. This is Super Panavision 70.
The first Saturday, George Cukor came in and ran the bulk of the movie. Bill Ziegler didn't even come in that. I went in and was assigned to taking the notes. I didn't take shorthand, not the fastest longhand. And I remember when we were running, I finally just couldn't hardly keep up. And George started yelling and screaming at me, and why wasn't I going faster on the notes, and why was I asking him to back up and do this? And this went on, and Gene Allen was sitting there, and he said to Mr. Cukor, he says, "You realize that John is not a secretary, and he doesn't take shorthand, so please relax and let him back up and ask the question again." So we got along famously, but by the end of the day, I had taken a complete yellow legal pad and filled with notes.
Between 1964, when the film was made, and today, although we've now come into digital editing technologies, the method of cutting film has not changed. When the editor finishes cutting that film, it goes into negative cutting. Once it comes out of negative cutting and goes to the laboratory, you start making color-corrected timed prints to try and get each of these little strips of film, which are shot with different lighting and different positions, to make them appear as if they had all been photographed under the same lighting conditions, with the same camera, on the same day.
These are clips made from every shot of My Fair Lady from a Technicolor dye transfer print. Color is permanent because it's on metal-based dyes instead of vegetable dyes, which is the other method. We would use these clips to create the proper color in the 70-millimeter version and in the 35-millimeter version.
Once you've gone through however many months of research that it takes to find out where your elements are, and once you've brought those elements together, and once you've recut your negative, you're then basically at the same point, or hopefully at the same point, that the makers of the film were when they were ready to start making their first prints. The making of the film and the restoration of the film, the remaking of the film, actually come together at this point.
Let's test her in public and see how she fares.
The time has come, 6 months and more than $600,000 later. The restoration is complete. Let's take a look and see the difference between old and new. Here's the original film.
Well, you've had a bit of your own back, as you call it. Have you had enough, and are you going to be reasonable, or do you want any more?
You want me back only to pick up your slippers and put up with your tempers and fetch and carry for you.
And now the film restored.
Well, you've had a bit of your own back, as you call it. Have you had enough, and are you going to be reasonable, or do you want any more?
You want me back only to pick up your slippers and put up with your tempers and fetch and carry for you.
No, I didn't say I wanted you back at all.
Oh, indeed. Then what are we talking about?
Well, about you, not about me. If you come back, you'll be treated as you've always been treated. I can't change my nature. I don't intend to change my manners. My manners are exactly the same as Colonel Pickering.
That's not true. He treats a flower girl as if she were a duchess.
Well, I treat a duchess as if she was a flower girl.
Quite a difference, wouldn't you say?
Just so.
Now the world can have the lady with all her splendor. In its original 70mm Panavision and state-of-the-art digital sound.
The gentle sex was made for man to marry, but with a little bit of luck, with a little bit of luck, you can have it all and not get hooked.
All at one summer, several stories high, knowing I'm on the street where you live.
I only know when he began to dance with me, I could have danced, danced,
Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, the lady is back.